Hi there. In this session, we are going to revisit accommodations and modifications, just so that we all are sharing the same understanding of what they are and how to implement them. If you remember from last year, we took a look at this visual of accommodations and modifications to really show us the different levels. As we talked about last year, this first level, the ground level, is really where we modify our instructional delivery before attempting to implement some of those accommodations and modifications. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that now. But when we think about accommodations and even modifying our instructional delivery, it's the application of the UDL principles, really looking for opportunities for various means of representation, expression, and engagement. The ground floor, modifying our instructional delivery. This is what we do as teachers. It's the art of teaching. We need to think outside the box in order to meet the needs of all of our students and look for new ways to approach content. This not only helps keep things exciting for students and meet their needs, but it also keeps things exciting for us as teachers. Some of us have been teaching a long time and we don't want to do things the same way. So really looking for those opportunities. And it also provides us with some valuable information about the students in terms of what they are capable of doing. So really this is an opportunity to first see if they can meet those grade level standards and maybe where we need to go next if they're not meeting with success with what we're putting in place in the classroom. So we need to think to ourselves, what is the goal for the lesson or for the unit? And what do I want my students to be able to do? So if we can focus on those two things, sometimes what we need to provide for students who have some needs in our classroom, it becomes a little bit more clear for us. This might take the shape of stations, and this isn't just for our co-teachers. You can have stations or centers or workshops, whatever you want to call it, if you're just one teacher in the classroom. So just keep that in mind. Collaborative groups, student engagement strategies and routines. So how are we going to engage the student in the lesson? How are we going to gauge whether they're understanding what we're teaching them throughout the day? Technology is a great opportunity for that, especially now that we're moving to students having more access. And then also allowing for student choice as much as possible. This is really important because it not only gives students control over their learning and how they're showing us that they're learning, but it makes them feel a little bit more independent. And that's really important even at the elementary levels, that we're putting that emphasis on their independence and taking control of their own learning. Some examples I'm going to show you very quickly. We have some choice boards, a tiered assignment, window pane, and stations or centers. And I'm just going to show you one of the choice boards. There's two here, and the links will be available for you to see the other examples. But this is a choice board for elementary word study, and you'll see here Maria from North Wales. Thank you, Maria. She has one square that must be done by all students. And so that's kind of the starting point for students, and then they just need to complete two more. That can be done in class, after a lesson has been taught and there's some extra time, or it could be done for homework as well, just as long as this is turned in and the assignments are completed by the end of the week. So this is a great opportunity, again, for that choice and for students to pick how they want to show us what they are learning. Tiered assignments, they take a little bit more planning, but again, they're a great way to differentiate. This one is for research skills. And so the three assignments, the assignment for our advanced learners is going to be more in depth. And we need to remember to differentiate for those students who do need that enrichment piece. And so, we need to consider those students are going to be working at probably a faster pace, and they're going to be grasping concepts more quickly. And so how are we differentiating for them so they don't have downtime, they're not bored, and they're still being challenged and met with a rigorous curriculum? And then, varying your assignments for on grade level learners or struggling learners. And there's different ways to structure tiered assignment. You don't have to do it advanced, on grade level, and struggling. So we can definitely provide you with more information related to that. A window pane. This is great for reading activities. It doesn't have to be in an ELA classroom. It can be in social studies or science, but for students to really draw or write down what they've learned in sequence and how concepts connect. It's also great for directions. So if you have multiple directions and a student really can't remember or process all of them at once, writing the directions out in separate window panes and then having them peel back a post-it to reveal each direction after they've completed one step. It's just, again, another way to differentiate that piece. And then stations or centers. This particularly is for math, how you can structure a 60-minute math block. And obviously at the secondary level, it would be a little bit different, but not too much different because it's not, it's only a 15-minute difference. But again, there's different models that you can do to make sure that you're using your time most effectively. And again, this is nothing else. These aren't accommodations. This is just adjusting instructional delivery and how you're presenting information. So what I want you to do is just stop and jot. In what ways do you adjust your instructional delivery, and how often do you try to switch things up? Really think about what you have in place in your classroom, because we want to share those after this video is over and kind of reflect on each other's, and maybe we can get some new ideas. Level 1 accommodations. Accommodations are changes in how a student accesses the information and demonstrates learning. So they are not changing the learning expectations, instructional level, or content for the students. It's really just how they're accessing it. It is simply leveling the playing field for students so that they can participate in the general education curriculum at grade level. You're probably used to accommodations and accommodations and implement a lot of these on a regular basis. Provide study guides and notes emphasizing key information. Adding picture symbols or visuals, this is really important. You can't underestimate the power of a picture. Some students really just need that cue. Highlighting keywords, breaking tasks or instructions into smaller parts. This is really important for students who maybe have difficulty focusing or processing information. And so taking the time to do that, chunk things for them on a daily basis. If students need accommodations for an assessment, they need it every day. So that's important to keep in mind, because we put things in IEPs for students to help them access information, and it's really important for the test, and that's great, but they need those all along then. And that's really what's going to help them be prepared for that test. So we just need to keep that in mind as well. Some examples of accommodations for behavior. On the left is really just accommodations for kind of that fidgety behavior, attention behavior kind of that we might see in the classroom. And some of you might have these things in your classroom already, but some sensory breaks for students, stress balls, chair leg bands, which are, chair leg bands, which are pictured here, standing desks, which are becoming more popular, and even fidgets. That's down here on the bottom. There's all different types of fidgets. Some are quieter than others, so you might want to keep that in mind when trying a fidget with a student. Some other just classroom accommodations for behavior, and we've talked about this with the behavior specialists this year, some of those tier 1 interventions that we can put in place for students, but really making sure routines are tight. Classroom engagement is going to help students move around the room. Reinforcing students for great behavior and having that classroom system in place and being consistent with it. I know I'm even at fault for this. I have great routines at the beginning of the year and reinforcing students all the time for great behavior, but as they get things under control and we get moving with the year, things tend to get a little bit looser, and then sometimes that's when we see the behaviors pop up again. Assigning roles to students. So if you have students that, get distracted or move around, give them a role, give them a purpose in the classroom to help them focus. This time piece is huge, I think, as teachers. When we have downtime or transition time, that's typically difficult for some students who struggle with their behavior and attention. And so if we can be consistent with planning our lessons so that students don't have that downtime and we're minimizing transition time, it will help them and it'll help us. Level 2 modifications. Modifications are changes in what a student is expected to do or learn. Okay, so this does change or reduce learning expectations. And for that reason, that is why we don't use these very often. They're reserved for students with more significant needs. And they're only to be used after we've tried a lot of accommodations. We want to make sure that those accommodations have been in place and we've tried them for a period of time before we move to modifying work. Modifications provide students opportunities to participate in the general education classroom meaningfully. And so really it is paring down some of the curriculum, maybe lowering grade level, and we'll take a look at some examples. Reducing content, complexity, or difficulty level, decreasing the amount of work required, providing lower reading material, or even a modified grading system. A go-to modification in past has been to eliminate an answer choice, which is not a preferred modification, because what are we really expecting students to do and what does that provide a student? So we want to think about, okay, if a student needs a modification, is that really the best choice? Could we, slightly reword the question so that the student can understand the question better? Or can we kind of focus on key concepts rather than just eliminating an answer choice? Level 3 and 4 accommodation or modifications here at the top of the pyramid are reserved for 1 to 2% of students. And so it's a very small number of students overall. And really it's students who would be taking the alternative state assessment, the PASA, and it would definitely be articulated in the student's IEP and discussed at an IEP meeting. Level 3 modifications would be a parallel activity. So think of it the same topic, different materials. Okay, it might be high interest materials or materials from a lower or higher grade level. We should make sure if we're using materials from a lower grade level that they look like the materials used by the same age peers. We wouldn't want a high school student using materials that look like they belong in a kindergarten classroom, and we need to be aware of that. Parallel activity could also be authentic or real life activities in the school. So really applying some of the skills that are being taught in class and then giving the student the opportunity to actually apply those in the school building. Level 4 modifications. So this would be an alternate activity. Students work side by side with their peers, but not on the same activity or skills. So we only use this after attempting to include the student by using one of the levels previously discussed. Okay, just because a student is completing an alternate activity doesn't mean that they need to be removed from the classroom. When we plan for this, students are able to work side by side, and that's important because we do want that social piece for our students and for them to feel like they are part of the classroom. An example of an alternate activity. So if you are teaching a standard in the class and there's no alternate eligible content, which is what students who take the PASA are assessed on, alternate eligible content, they will they have the opportunity then to be working on IEP goals or another goal that they have related to the content. Maybe they need something retaught, and so they don't necessarily need to be working on the same concept or skill as their peers. And so that's important to keep in mind, and I think it takes a little bit of pressure off of the teacher too, because they don't need to be held accountable for every single thing if they're receiving level 3 and 4 modifications. And again, if you're unsure, just ask the special education case manager or an inclusion facilitator in your building, and they can help you think through that process and what it looks like. So now what? In the next section, Jenna is going to discuss the process of essentialization, which is extremely helpful in developing and planning for level 3 and 4 modifications. The process of, okay, so I have a grade level standard. How do I take that and streamline it down to exactly what a student needs in order to develop that parallel or alternate activity or assignment or lesson? So she'll have more information on that. But to leave you at the end of this session, I want you to watch a video, and I'll post the link to the discussion board. And I love this video for a number of reasons. One, because it includes one of our very own North Penn teachers, Sharon Dumblediner, whom I love, and a former North Penn student. And Sharon had an opportunity to meet up with a former student years after he graduated. And I think it highlights why we do this as teachers. That yes, sometimes it takes a lot of planning and time, but really when it comes down to it, it's all about the students and what they need. And we don't realize at the time how much of an impact that really does have. And so I love that this video really captures how much that it matters to students. And I know that what you're doing matters to your students this year, and it will next year. So take a look at the video and then look for some discussion questions afterwards. Thank you.